Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Holloman, and today's short presentation is a grammar review, but I promise you, you will not hate it. It goes very fast, and it's a fun way for you to test yourself as we move along. So as you're writing, these are things I always want you to keep in mind. Your instructor will help you think through these things too in feedback and as you're in your workshop groups. So this is really just to always remind you of some of those skills that we're learning in advanced writing. So here we go. As you write, these are some examples that I've pulled from students over the years. This is just a classic sentence that could appear. This is someone going on a terrifying trip, and so I am not ready to admit that my trip had been so terrifying. So the first thing you do is isolate those weak verbs. As you look at how to write with flair, you can easily find that list of weak verbs. The reason why they're not useful to you is they do not produce an image or a mood. They tell you nothing. So think about what kind of verbs you can put in there that can really produce a mood and an image for the reader. So what about this? I hesitate to admit that my trip terrified me. So you just get a little picture there of someone hesitating. What about this one? I have a lot of students over the years have said, but if you're really talking about a state of being, like something that's an existential thing, how do you get rid of that weak verb? And some weak verbs are okay. Usually I tell students that they can have 2 or 3 in a paragraph, no more. But say you're trying to describe yourself and you say, I am over 6 feet tall and have green eyes. Well, do you have a mood? Is there an image there? What about this? I tower over others at 6 feet tall, and I inherited green eyes from my father. It's just a way of letting the reader see more and giving a sense of valence to the verb. Like I tower over gives me a sense of how you feel about being tall. That's the power of the strong verb. Now, what about this? I was excited because it was very interesting that there were 4 ducks sitting on the pond, not 3. Okay, odd sentence with a lot of weak verbs. So think about how you can revise that. First of all, tell me, don't show me. I jumped up and squealed. It mattered deeply that 4 ducks, not 3, sat on the still pond. Now, just think, you do not have to get rid of every single one, but anytime you can put a verb in there that gives an image and a mood that shows me something happening, that's going to be great writing. Here's another situation. Here's someone, I was going to ask my sister to be my maid of honor. Now I read that and I'm thinking, are there parts of this sentence that you can flesh out, maybe to create characterization, a setting? So think whenever you have a character, can you show me that person? Don't tell me, get rid of the weak verbs, and also always flesh out sensory detail in narrative. It's an exercise in pathos, so sights, sounds, anything you can. Here's the student revision. I approached her door, the one scattered with corny inspirational slogans that I actually liked, to ask my eternally optimistic sister to endure my bratty engagement and serve as my maid of honor. I know everything about these sisters. I love it. It's just a way to think, how can I really transport the reader? Okay, now here's a little test for you. So as you're following along, you can just check yourself. Find the correct sentence. So look at those 3 sentences, and this is just a test to see if you know how to use the colon or the semicolon. All right, it is number 3. I trudged through the bitter winter snow in my boots, scarves, and mittens. Now, if you wanted to make the colon correct, you would do this. I trudged through the bitter winter snow in the following essentials. Remember, the colon follows that noun: boots, scarves, and mittens. The semicolon connects 2 sentences. The second amplifies or explains the first. So I trudged through the bitter snow in my essentials. I threw on boots, scarves, and mittens. You guys can have so much fun as you toggle the advanced grammar and try out different things. Try this one. Remember, the colon follows a noun, so it's not going to be the first one. Remember, for number 2, semicolons connect 2 complete sentences. I desperately wanted, technically that is a full sentence. There's a verb there, but the second part has to also be a complete sentence. So the correct one is actually 3. I desperately wanted chocolate, coffee, and my slippers. This is just what we did before. I desperately wanted my comfort items, colon. You get that list there. Think about number 2. This is how a student was able to make a semicolon. I desperately wanted my comfort items, semicolon. I gathered my chocolate, coffee, and my slippers. Now, here's a situation where all of the punctuation could be correct. And so think about which one is strongest as I read it. In the end, I realized 3 nuggets of wisdom, semicolon. don't eat raw fish in Idaho, don't lie, and don't call your mother from a fraternity party. I'm sure you want to read that narrative. What about number 2? In the end, I realized 3 nuggets of wisdom, colon, don't eat raw fish in Idaho, don't lie, don't call your mother from a fraternity party. What about number 3? In the end, I realized 3 nuggets of wisdom. And then the person decided to use the dash there. Technically, dashes, you have 2 of them and they amplify something in the middle of the sentence. But in this case, all 3 are actually correct. I might choose number 2 because it's so definitive. It's like that list. Here are my 3 nuggets of wisdom. So that's the one I would choose first. And then I might go to the dash and then end with the semicolon because it's more of a subtle punctuation mark. Think about this one. Could you explain to someone, my favorite teaching quote is we teach what we most need to learn. Could you explain to someone which is correct and why? So look at number 2. I warmed myself by the fire in the cabin as the snow fell softly around us. There's no need for a comma there, especially because that clause appears at the end of the sentence. You don't need a comma. I warmed myself by the fire in the cabin for number 1. As the snow fell softly around us, that's not a complete sentence, so it doesn't work with the semicolon. And then I warmed myself by the fire in the cabin has that comma, which you don't need. So good, just keep practicing. Here you can see a little easier. Number 1, you've got an introductory clause there. It's not a full sentence, so the semicolon wouldn't work. Number 2, you've got that introductory clause with a comma that would work. Number 3, technically, you would just need a comma. I don't think you can put a colon unless you have that longer, sentence that leads off. Otherwise, it just sounds a little clunky. But because he left for Jamaica, I stood alone on my graduation day. Now, here's another test, which is correct and why. Scan through and see which ones you would choose. It's number 1. The story ends how it began, in an empty garage with the Gibson guitar. Number 3, the story ends how it began, in an empty garage with a Gibson guitar is also correct. It's that use of the dash. Okay, here's your final test of the dashes. Sometimes students think they just want to use one word. That's a good time for italics. The dash is really for a clause, something that would be set apart, even with commas if you want. So I told her, using all my powers of persuasion, that Max lied. He wasn't coming. That's perfect. Number 2, again, I would rather you use an italics because it doesn't work to put dashes like that aren't around a big clause. And again, the colon, it doesn't work. It's not following the long noun that leads to a list. So you have number 1 that really works. So good job. That was just a little bit of a grammar test to get you ready as you review your narrative and think about toggling the advanced grammar and choosing strong verbs. Thanks so much.